These unconventional times require unconventional conversations. Listen in as your host, Richard Gordon, engages in one-on-one conversations with numerous leaders, elected officials, politicians, and others to learn what's happening in your state, on the Hill, and across America. Now, here's the host of Unconventional Times, Richard Gordon.
This is Unconventional Times. I'm your host, Richard Gordon. Thank you for tuning in. We're coming to you live from Savannah, Georgia. And that's why this program is going to be just a little bit different than the episodes we've done in the past. We're going to be meeting with important environmental decision makers from across the country. They're all here in Savannah to talk about some of the major environmental issues of our day. They're at the Environmental Council of the States meeting, which meets twice a year, to bring these people together to discuss the major environmental issues that are affecting your lives. Forest fires, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, major storms, super snowstorms. These are the issues that people are worried about when talking about the environment, and they affect each and every one of us every day. So we're going to take some time and sit down with the people who make decisions that affect your environment and your life. I also want to take a moment here to thank our sponsor, Appaluma. You know, people may not know this, but many years ago, I was an environmental commissioner. Yes, it's true. I was Commissioner Gordon. I still get a lot of grief for that. But, you know, when I made decisions, I had to make them almost in the dark because data was everywhere and I couldn't pull it together to understand it and understand how different pieces affected each other. Well, what Appaluma does is they take that data and they bring it to light. So data from years ago could be compared to data today. And by doing so, the people we're talking to and the people who are here at this ECOS conference, the Environmental Council of the States conference here in Savannah, what they could do is make better decisions, and better decisions make your life better. You have made a real decision and dedication to public service. You've been in the environment, in conservation, in natural resources. Talk to us a little bit about it. Why'd you do it? Why'd you make that decision?
A little bit about myself. So I came from a small town in northwestern Alabama, and I went to the University of Alabama. And when I came out of college, ADM was my very first job. Literally 10 days after I graduated college, I went to work at ADM, and so it became a home to me. And I say that because there were so many people that were my age that came into state government, and public service then just became a calling, and you know, you hear that, and it's really a God thing. He put me in the right spot at the right time, and it was a really, really good thing. The other reason is being in the environmental side. Alabama, and I'm sure I will say this many times on this podcast, Alabama is such a gorgeous state. It's the natural resources. We have everything from the coast to the mountains. So protecting the environment in Alabama is important to me, and so it's a great thing. I was fortunate to spend almost 25 years at ADM, and then go to another agency and go into the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and kind of getting away from the black hat environmental regulations to get to talk hunting and fishing, and and it was really the right time to do that and get to kind of lead another agency, and so it worked out very well. But
Why public service?
Well, I've been a public servant for 38 years.
Wow.
And I just loved it. I love the fact that I could clearly see that everything that we do was impacting somebody. And I started to realize everything I do must impact somebody other than me. And so I just decided I want to be a public servant. I want to do everything I can to devote my life and my career to helping people and making this world better.
So you are the Chief Data and Technology Steward.
That's right.
You want to explain to me? Let's pull that one apart and tell me what it is.
So, a lot of times technology is kind of keeping the trains moving, like keeping everything on time, making sure the network works, does the software work? And while that's super important, it's not really what I want to do. What I'm interested is, how do we apply technology in its most current and urgent way to the problems that we have. And in the state of New Mexico and across the country, a lot of it's about the environment. So I didn't want the job of kind of keeping things going. I wanted the job of looking to the landscape of opportunities to work on our problems and applying exactly the right data and stewardship to get there.
About budget cuts, and the
Yes.
budget cuts that come from the federal government for whatever, they have dramatically cut the amount of money goes into states. How does it affect you and your job?
Yeah, it affects all of us, all the states, including Maryland. We rely a lot on funding from the federal government. And as you know, the federal government is prioritizing differently. So a lot of funding that we depended on are no longer. And so what it does for us is we have to find ways in Maryland to be more resilient and to be more self-reliant on our own funding sources. And it's a challenge because I have to look at all the sources that are coming in and make sure that our programs are funded. So it's not easy, but it's a challenge, but it's one that I think when you are budgeting anyway and you're trying to fund all of your programs, you want to make sure that you can fund them without relying on outside sources.
And like every state, Alabama has its challenges also.
Yes, absolutely. And this, right now, the biggest challenge that, from a non-policy standpoint, but from just a challenge for the agency, is funding. We have, you never know exactly what you're going to walk into for an agency, but we have, the thing that has, I guess, most surprised me about coming into this role is kind of the lack of funding, and we were running at a significant deficit, something that could not be sustained, and so our funding is at a critical level.
Well, I think we're having that problem with the news in a lot of
It's a
ways.
great example, yeah.
You know, we really question, the public question. One of the reasons I do this podcast, by the way, is to have a longer version of discussions of important issues, because I think the public has gotten to the point that everything is criticized. Everything is attacked. If we're attacking the credibility of the FBI, let's say, like, really, they're lying to us? I mean, I just think we're at a moment in time in history that perhaps that's the case.
And I think having a platform that has specific, this is not just scraped from the web. These documents come from the department. Every question that you ask to Apple Luma, we call it the Luma platform, the Luma chat, you can have a footnote that says what document that came from.
Is that an agent?
So the agent got us that document. Yeah, you asked the question, the agent said, yeah, it was a natural language query, which means you don't have to have a special code to ask questions. You could just say, yeah, what were the last 3 inspection reports on this pool in Las Cruces? Literally, we got that question. That was the question. So they want to just know, let me look at those last 3 inspections. Okay, now I'm going to go inspect it. What do I think, what problems did I see before? What can I keep my eye out for? What do I think is going to happen? So I think one thing is that you have annotated information. So in other words, the answer comes with a link that says, where did that come from? So that's one way to address lack of trust, which I think is what you're talking about.
Our federal funding had been stagnant, consistent but level for about the last 10 years. The general fund has increased a little bit over the last 10 years, and our fees had not increased over the last 10 years. We don't want to be bloated. That's the thing. I want to use the citizens give us money, industries give us money. We want to use it wisely. But we also have to have the correct amount to get the work done. And that has been the biggest challenge that I'm facing right now.
So talk to me a little bit about AI. How do you use it? How are you going to use it? I mean, it's a brave new world.
I always think that government is always behind industry on how to use technology, and I think we're the same way on AI. At this conference, the ECOS conference that we're at, in the last few ECOS conferences, AI has been a large topic. Not to say that we're not using it at all now, but we don't have there's not a huge platform that we're using right now. But we are looking, how can we use AI for permitting? How can we use it to increase the speed of permitting? We do a great job, but how can we make it even better? How can it be even better?
Tell me how it works in your world. What's the connection between artificial intelligence and the environment?
So for me, I start with the problem, not the technology.
Okay.
So when I got this job, Chief Data and Technology Steward, in my mind, the problem was clear. The problem was that the New Mexico Environment Department has been around for a long time, and they have a lot of paper, and they can't get to that paper.
Right.
And they are very, they hold the paper close. A lot of people are very much into their paper. Makes sense. It's their permits they worked on. They're 500 pages. They care about those permits. So I get it. And then they transitioned maybe 10 years ago to mostly making PDFs. But guess what? Those PDFs are that electronic, whether it's a PDF or a Excel or whatever it is, that could be on a server somewhere with the file name, that person's name. I mean, there's no order to even the electronic data. So when I understood that and I talked to people, I always put humans in the center. You know, we talk about humans in the loop. I really think the humans need to be in the center of what you develop. Not in the loop, not watching, but everything. So I start with the human. So I had one of my great friends and so smart woman in resource recovery. She told me she spends 20% of her time looking for documents.
Oh my goodness. What a waste.
I tell that to other people, they go, oh, I think it's more.
Really?
Yeah. So when I heard that, I thought that is not acceptable.
So let's talk about AI, because it's hard to talk about technology and not talk about that. Tell me how you're using it and how you see it in your department for years to come.
Right. Well, I really see it as one of those critical things that are really going to allow us at the end of the day to make better decisions. It's going to free up a lot of those administrative functions that many of my, for instance, permitting engineers go through when they're evaluating a project, you know, whether it meets the regulations and the standards. So I have embraced AI since day one, and it's very apparent over at the General Assembly. In fact, they are looking to our agency to really pilot some projects and some use cases to really present that to other state agencies in South Carolina as options.
Oh, interesting. So you'll use AI as a test in the environment and then use it in other departments.
That's correct. And
That's a great idea.
In permitting, you know,
Right.
so many agencies across the country and at the federal level are focused on permit reform.
Right.
The need to streamline that process. And we had just finished going through many of our processes, going through Lean Six Sigma. And the next just natural step, once you really lay out your processes, is to plug into AI.
So talk to me a little bit about AI. How do you use it? How are you going to use it? I mean, it's a brave new world.
I always think that government is always behind industry on how to use technology, and I think we're the same way on AI. At this conference, the ECOS conference that we're at, in the last few ECOS conferences, AI has been a large topic. Not to say that we're not using it at all now, but we don't have there's not a huge platform that we're using right now. But we are looking, how can we use AI for permitting? How can we use it to increase the speed of permitting? We do a great job, but how can we
Make it even better.
How can it be even better? How can we review permits? How can we, on the enforcement side, we get so much data that comes in. How can, there's a way that AI can help us do that. We saw a presentation yesterday of using AI to take historical data to see how groundwater plumes move, and that way you can tell if an event occurs, you can see what it's going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and that way it allows you to make more informed decisions and help. So we're not there.
Right.
We're not close to there, but it is the wave of the future. It is something that every state is facing. Some states are a little ahead of the others.
Sure.
We are committed to it. We understand how we need it, but exactly how it's going to work right now,
We don't know.
I don't know.
What are some of your priorities? What are some of the things you're trying to accomplish in South Carolina?
Well, we're in a very unique situation because you may have heard recently that we went through the first major government restructuring since the 90s in South Carolina. So the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control split into two agencies, Department of Public Health and Department of Environmental Services. And so this was a very significant time. And I think especially because even though we shared a vision, healthy people living in healthy communities, we both had specific needs from a budget perspective and just solutions that were tailored either towards environment or health. And so our priority for the last couple of years was to build a strong foundation for South Carolina's first standalone environmental agency. And it was so important. Failure was not an option for
Right.
us as a state. We needed a very strong foundation, and we feel very good about that. We have the agency, you know, with a state, what I like to say sometimes, we have our sea legs. And for the last year, though, we've been really focusing on many of the priorities that we have. We're looking at our workforce retention. We're looking at technology. I feel like right now there's such a focus on state government and what is the role and how much state government do you need. And it's so important to operate very efficiently and cost effective, everything that you do. Technology is one of those areas that I think is going to really springboard our agency to the next level.
Talk to me a little bit about AI. We talked a lot about it here at this conference. How do you use it? How do you see it growing in your department?
We're starting to use AI. It's really important. It certainly has made some things that we do a lot easier. We had one project, an AI project. It was a pilot project, and it ended up being amazing. And so I can't get into it too much, but there was a process where the public was relying on my agency to give them data on real estate. It took us, it's still not now though, because the project is almost done, but before we piloted this AI program and project, it was taking us about 6 months to get back to our customers and stakeholders, because it's a lot of data, a lot of land information.
Right.
We had to go
Do you digitize it, or what do you do with it?
Yeah, so what we did, we used this AI program. They came in and looked at all the data sources that we had. They're coming from counties and cities, and it's just a lot of data.
I bet.
And so they were able to help us consolidate all of the data, read it, and give the reports that we were writing manually and returning back to the real estate community and consumers and people looking to purchase land. It just took forever.
I bet.
But this AI system that we have now, it's incredible. It is incredible.
It's amazing where it's going, isn't it?
And we're hoping to use it more, like with permitting and things
I was
like
going to
that.
ask you,
Yes.
does it speed up permitting?
Well, it's going to.
Right.
Right now, we had to clean up our own process. So
First,
I went in, one thing I'm really big on is process improvement. And so we had to clean up our steps first. We had a lot of non-value steps in our process. So we cleaned it up, leaned it, and now that we have the right to process and we have milestones and metrics, now it's time to use AI.
So we're at a conference whose major theme is economic development and the environment. How do you see those two things sitting together? You know, it's interesting, you talked about permitting, and permitting allows business to do what it needs to do for industry to move forward. How do you see those two issues laying together and working well? We heard from Governor McMaster yesterday, I guess, talk about it a little bit. I'm interested in your views.
Yeah, economic prosperity and environmental prosperity go together. They go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive at all.
Right.
And if you think about it, and I think the governor touched on this, tourism is one of the main reasons why people come to South Carolina. We're the fastest growing state in the nation.
Oh,
which
I
is
didn't know
just,
that. Wow,
it's
really?
amazing. People are coming, but people are bringing businesses as well. And what makes our state so special, you know, is our water, our environment, our natural resources. And so it's important for us to be able to grow responsibly and keep that environment healthy and prosperous, just like we're seeing the opportunities with economic development. One of the things we're doing as an agency is we see a need for us to work more collaboratively with our local government and local leaders that are making decisions every day on how their community is going to grow. And what we do, we call them economic environmental summits. And we go in and it's like a portfolio we bring to that region. And we say, okay, let's go through all the infrastructure as far as your readiness to grow and take advantage of some of the economic opportunities that are out there. And, you know, South Carolina has a lot of rural counties.
Right.
A lot of counties that really need jobs, need to to grow and support quality of life in those areas. And so we go in there, we talk about wastewater capacity, how's your drinking water, can you sustain this growth? What about waste management, landfills? What about water quantity? Do you have a good supply of water, and is it good quality?
Talk to me about forever chemicals, PFAS, and I mean that is something that's bedeviling, I think, all of your colleagues. How are you dealing with it in Alabama?
Tell you a little bit, that goes back to a little bit of my history. And so I managed the North Alabama office of ADM. I did that for about 17 years. It's in Decatur, Alabama. And one of the few PFAS manufacturers is in Decatur. So going all the way back to 99, 2000, 2001, we were at the tip of the spear in Decatur. We had two industries in Decatur that manufactured those chemicals. So I have been having this conversation for now almost a career. So it is difficult. Just walked out of a meeting with our Region 4 colleagues, and that was the same things we were talking about in 2005, trying to see what's coming is how do we handle biosolids from wastewater facilities? How do we handle the beneficial use of those to ensure that they don't have the PFAS chemicals in there, and how do we give is something that the landfills just don't have the capacity to handle all of the sludge coming from the facilities. How do we ensure that's what's going on? I mean, that's a great fertilizer. It's great to be used, but we want to make sure that we're managing it well.
What is the future of Project Velocity?
Right now, we're in a really important phase, and it's really user adoption. Largely, things are in. Largely, the platform's working great. There are tweaks we're making, but largely it's there. And now it's really change management. How do you get users to use it?
Yeah.
So I've started something that I started a couple of months a while ago, called AMA, Ask Meta Anything. It could be Ask Me Anything, but Ask Meta Anything, and I do that every week for 30 minutes. And at first I thought, who's going to come? Oh, we never have less than 20 people. And they always have a lot of questions.
Wow. So much of the economy of Maryland comes out of the Chesapeake for one reason or another. How do you, and this has been a big subject to this conference, how do you merge? How do you have economic growth sit next door to what you do, protecting the environment? How are those two issues, which to a lot of people are contradictory, how do you make that work? How's the balance?
Well, I've said this a lot, and anyone who's heard me speak, it's a win-win. It's not a win-lose. We have to, and the Governor Westmore, he is really, he's been pushing the statement that you don't have to lose. So when you're protecting the environment, we still have to grow the economy. It's not either or. And so we do strike a balance. So we are doing everything we can to make sure that Maryland is prosperous. It's growing economically, but at the same time, we are pushing regulations to protect the environment. So it's a balance.
Right.
We have to just make sure that we are doing things that we're not pushing businesses out of business. That's not what we do.
Right.
We want businesses to thrive in Maryland. We want them to come to Maryland. And we also want them to adhere to the regulations that we have. But again, it's a balance.
Well, we all want to be safe. As you put it so well, we all want safe drinking water. And so it's
And of any role that I have as an environmental director, ensuring that someone's drinking water, A, is clean, and B, is there, to ensure that the systems have the funding that they need, are maintaining it correctly, but that their treatment is providing the best drinking water possible. And we've got some really good. Alabama is a very wet state. We've got a lot of more navigable stream miles than I think almost anyone in the country. We've got an abundance of water, but we've got to make sure that what's going to the tap is clean, healthy, and that's a priority for our agency.
Let me ask you a very different question. I was reading up on you to prepare for this. Environmental injustice is something that I know you have spoken about before, and how the environment and how we treat it affects different communities. Yes. How do you deal with that? I know I've heard the governor talk about it, and I know you've talked about it. I mean, just the environmental injustices that we see. How does that work?
It's so important. One of the first things I did when I started as secretary in Maryland was create a new environmental justice unit. And I hired the first assistant secretary ever
Wow.
in Maryland's Department of the Environment. And now we go out and we work with the communities directly. We listen to their concerns. When we are putting out our new permits, or if we have permits that are up for reinstatement, we include them. We bring them in the process. They're at the table. Their voice is heard. No, it was not like that before.
So how does that play? I mean, are some communities affected more than others?
Oh, yes.
Is it an urban versus rural? Is it define it. How would you?
Yeah, so we have an environmental justice screening tool.
Okay.
It is amazing. If you ever wanted to look at it, it's maryland.gov.
Okay.
MDE.gov. So this screening tool, if you look at it, it's like a map. And you can see where the pollution is in all the different counties and cities. And
And
it's
Superfund sites, those type of things?
not just Superfund sites. It's literally
Much broader.
just, it's industrial pollution.
Oh, really?
Pollution from cars. And so we track it and we can see it. And so when you look at this environmental justice map, we give it scores. So some, and I think it goes up to maybe 90. Some areas have scores of 90. And when we see that and we are looking at permits, new permits or reinstated permits, we look at the score. And we now take that into consideration.
That's terrific.
And we tell them, you want to put another building or whatever they're trying to do
Sure.
in this community, they're already overburdened. Can we help? Can we help them?
Right.
What can we do to reduce that pollution? And so it's great because now we have a way of trying to protect those communities who've been left behind for so long.
Those emergency
Does
responders.
real-time monitoring help with that? Does real-time monitoring so you can know instantly?
It obviously, yes, because the more data you have, the better you are. So especially if you have a release or a spill, understanding exactly where it is, where it's going, what it could impact, and you can't do that without data. So getting that real-time monitoring, either already having the monitors in place or being able to deploy them extremely quickly, making sure our staff have the real-time capabilities to put in place where they can understand where that release is going, how far downstream, things like that. It allows you to make better, more consistent decisions.
Was the BP spill the worst environmental catastrophe you had to deal with? Or
Oh yeah, not even close.
Not even close?
That is probably. I mean, if you look in the history and in the United States, it's probably been the biggest one by funding and things like that. Absolutely. But it's. I always say this.
Valdez, maybe.
Yeah. But I always say this, and because everybody says, "What are you most proud of in your career?" And managing that spill, and understanding the unknown in 2010 and everything that was going on, and the perception that people had of our Gulf Coast and our Gulf Coast being so gorgeous and such a tourist spot. How do we get back? And the thing that I am most proud of is since 2010, all the way from 2010 to 2020 when COVID hit, the tourism numbers on our Gulf Coast increased dramatically, consistently from 2010 all the way through 2020. So that gives me pride that we did something right, that we protected our shorelines, that we cleaned it up to a way that people not only went back there, they desired to go back there. They carried their kids back there. It is their vacation spot. And so that gives me the pride that it was a terrible event. We managed it. We still have funding that's coming in. I was lucky enough to be able to manage the response, but then going to the Department of Conservation, and that is who manages all of the buckets of funding that are coming in. There's 5 different buckets, is kind of the way we call it, of where the funding comes in from that spill, and getting to do great environmental things, boots on the ground, work, protection, things like that. I kind of got to do full circle on that event. And so it's so as bad of a tragedy as it was in 2010, to see the good things that are coming out of it now, that's the way this is supposed to work.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it
It must
is.
fill you with a lot of pride. Let me thank you for listening or watching. It's greatly appreciated. We'll have more shows coming up soon, and I hope you'll tune in when we do. So, Richard Gordon for Unconventional Times, reminding you, stay unconventional.
You've been listening to Unconventional Times with your host, Richard Gordon. Check out all of the episodes of Unconventional Times on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Richard Gordon and all of his unconventional conversations, head on over to unconventionaltimes.com. Thanks for listening.